Sea of Legends is the Sandbox RPG app-driven board game which was kickstarted just over a year ago. And at the time of its kickstarting, there was actually a large amount of hype around this game because it promised so much. Well, I finally got my hands on the physical final copy of this game, and I want to do this review to answer the question, did it fulfill all the promises that it made, and did it live up to the hype? Hello everyone and welcome back to the Battlecast. In today's video, I'm doing a review for Sea of Legends, the board game from Guildhall Studios. Now this is a 1 to 4 player board game which really does a good job of emulating an open world sandbox RPG. Playtime will range from 1 to 2 hours. Now I have done a full gameplay session of this game, start to finish, so definitely check that out if you're curious about how this game plays. And as always, I review games based on gameplay components and fun factor. Let's go ahead and jump into gameplay. So one thing I gotta put right out there right away, this game is app driven. Now if you haven't left the video already, let me tell you that the app is important. This type of game, it just simply cannot function without an app. You would need such a huge book. At one point, the designer of the game told me how many pages of text this game has, and it's a lot. And that's because every time you change an element of the random setup, the app is working to tie stories together, and that creates a lot of text. So the general gameplay loop behind Sea of Legends is it sees each player choosing a pirate. Now each pirate has a kind of special ability and a certain storyline that goes with them. Additionally, everybody chooses a lover and a nemesis, of which there are quite a few. At its core, Sea of Legends is a dice manipulation game. You're going to want to accumulate dice, and you're going to want to be able to manipulate those dice to your results. So your captain ability, every time you roll a captain wheel symbol, your captain ability triggers. Every time you roll a rose symbol, your lover ability triggers. And every time you roll a dagger symbol, your nemesis ability triggers. Now throughout Sea of Legends, you're going to be attempting to go on various quests. You can pursue your captain storyline, which will potentially see your captain reach its legendary form and become quite strong. You can pursue your lover storyline, which allows your lover to level up and unlock additional abilities for those rose symbols on the dice. And finally, you can pursue your nemesis, where you can thereby kind of eliminate them from the game, because if your nemesis does level up, which does happen, those dagger symbols become increasingly deadly and will really throw a wrench in your plans. A player wins Sea of Legends when they gain 10 notoriety. And notoriety is gained through doing quests, it is gained through conquering ports, it is gained through finding buried treasure, and it is actually gained by burying your own treasure and also buying better ships. If you haven't picked up already, there's many ways to win, and that's why this game really does follow that sandbox feel. Now a turn in Sea of Legends is actually really simple. You can take an action and you can move. Now you can't mix and match, so you could do your action first and move after, or move first then take your action. The simple actions are fighting something and going on a quest. To go on a quest, you just have to be in the location where your quest token is located. And the reason this is important is because as you go along a quest chain, your quest token moves around, so you kind of have to pursue the quest around the map. The more complex actions are the port actions, which can see you buying a new ship, recruiting more crew, which will help you manipulate your dice, and going to the tavern, where you'll hear rumors of buried treasure. Now, all of these things will yield good stuff for you, and along that good stuff is notoriety, which helps you win the game. Another huge aspect of Sea of Legends is the NPC factions, non-player controlled. Now one of these factions is always the Spanish Armada. There's a Spanish galleon, or many Spanish galleons, who are roaming around the area, the Caribbean, trying to reclaim ports that players have captured, and kind of just generally throwing a wrench in the plans of everyone. I mean, they can actually be used to help you against the other NPC factions. But then, every time you set up the game, You pick 2 random factions, and there's a ton, and expansions actually have many more. But the ones in the core game are really well done, and they actually play very uniquely from each other. So the first faction is the Dread Tide, and this sees undead soldiers popping up and roaming around infecting ports, and if they infect 5 ports, they win the game. Next is the Children of Tlaloc, and these see merfolk actually going out to the periphery of the map, grabbing summoning stones, bringing them to Tortuga, and summoning their big monster, who will then wreck shop, and if they ever get the 4 tokens from the periphery, they win. Next we have the Atlantean faction, and these guys are pretty trippy actually. They are trying to chase down their king and kill their king, and if the king dies, they win. So you're trying to protect the king, but you can also find rare treasure and go to the king and cash it in. It's very cool. Now when you put it all together, you have a lot of people with a lot of ulterior motives moving around the map, and may the best pirate win. Now moving on to components. So Sea of Legends has actually some fairly good components, but one thing I gotta tell you right off the bat is don't let the small map fool you. This game is a table hog, and that's because not only does every player have a fairly sizable tableau, but each NPC faction and everything you need on this table and the dice rolling, and the rumor decks and the event, it's big. And if you got a small table, this would be a tight squeeze. I like the components themselves. I think the miniatures are nice, and the big ones are quite nice. I think they're certainly worth painting if you're into that. The app, as far as its function goes, functions well. I haven't had any problems with the app. It has music. I don't like the music, but it does its job well. No crashes or anything like that. One thing that left me wanting was the rulebook. Sea of Legends is kind of deliberately vague because of the nature of the game, and it wants to be vague because that's what creates this kind of zaniness when these NPC factions and the players mash. But let me just say, I think the 18-page FAQ speaks for itself, which is almost bigger than the rulebook itself. Now moving on to fun factor. Well, Sea of Legends actually does the open world sandbox thing very well. Every game I've played has been different. The situations that have arisen every game have been different. But one thing that comes with that sandboxy feel is sometimes things aren't very balanced. And I don't think that was the intention of this game. It's not like Twilight Imperium, it's not like Tapestry, where it's really trying to achieve some sort of balance. I don't think so. I think if situations arise in a certain order, someone is going to run away with the game, or going to find themselves in a very good position, or their lover combo matching up with their captain and their nemesis. It can be really strong. When it comes to NPC factions, I think that the theme and the goal of the NPC factions is excellent. I think they did it really well, but they've left their instructions quite vague. And the reason this is very important is because whoever's first player gets to choose, when there's a tie, which there often is, the first player gets to break the tie. And what that looks like is, for example, if a raging merfolk was either going to come into your space and attack you, or go into your opponent's space and attack them, well, you're obviously going to go attack your opponent. And this happens all the time. All the time. At the end of every round, you're going to be, swaying things in your favor. And that's important. It works very well, but it does create some scenarios where you're like, so if he drops the relic and then the Spanish galleon, it can be a little confusing at times. And again, that's why there's a big FAQ. This game definitely has king making. Oh boy, does it have king making. Gold is really important. If you collect gold, you can bury it for a 10 gold to 1 notoriety ratio. So you can just go drop 30 gold down for 3 notoriety. But if another player comes and attacks you, they take half your gold. And so there's a scenario like we've all seen in like Settlers of Catan, where if you're in third place, you might actually win the game because the first and second place person are really clashing and you just kind of slingshot ahead. One thing I found about the Sea of Legends promise, so they promised this narrative game, and I would say that simply does not come through as well as I had hoped. The stories are interesting, but they're just such short tidbits, and of course they are. I mean, it's one phone screen's worth of text to try and build up this story, and it just doesn't come through. You know, it evolves so rapidly. It's like, you hear a rumor about a monster out at sea. There's the monster's dead. It's like, okay, so, you know, it just, I didn't get hooked in or anything. I didn't find the story that good, personally. And sometimes the story doesn't match up. I mean, the app is doing its best to kind of loop in the lovers and nemesis of your opponents and bring them into your story. And so sometimes you have moments where it's like, okay, your opponent's nemesis is in Tortuga. And then you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that quest right now. I'm going to go do another. And it's like, your opponent's nemesis is actually over there. And you're like, wait, they're in two places at once. And then the next turn, your person finds that same person somewhere else. So there's not a lot of continuity in that regard. The solo play I'll touch on, because I actually did like the solo play, but not as a solo player. I liked it a lot more when I played two characters, two separate players. When you play truly on your own, the game evolves so rapidly because these NPC factions are just running rampant. So you're better off playing it like a two-player count. Playing both, I think, is probably the better way. Overall, I think Sea of Legends actually really delivered on the open world sandbox feel. I think bending the NPCs, their direction to your will is super cool. I think that's one of the best things about it. I think the nemesis lover combos, when combined with your captain, is super interesting. You know, every game you're drawing a bunch of lovers and nemesis, and if you find the fun combo, you might have a really, really great time. And there's a lot of replayability in that regard, not to mention the different NPC combos working together, like, the Dread Tide and the British, they're both like smashing forts. So I think in that regard, they've nailed it. As far as the story element goes, kind of fell flat for me. Would not play. This isn't a Tainted Grail. This isn't an Oathsworn. Or a Gloomhaven kind of story. This is a game that has a forgettable story each time you play, but it's new. Overall, I had fun playing Sea of Legends. I think in some areas it actually over-delivered. I think I was kind of surprised at how well, and in other areas it under-delivered. But overall, I have had fun every time I've played it. And on that note, I actually have enjoyed it the more I've played it. The first couple times, because of that FAQ and the zaniness, you're like, am I playing this right? But once you have a grasp of it, it does actually get pretty good. So that's my review for Sea of Legends. Do go ahead and check out the gameplay video if you're curious, and let me know in the comment section below if you got this game or if you want to get this game. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider supporting the channel by liking this video or subscribing to the channel, and especially hitting that bell icon. Feel free to leave comments in the comments section below. I love talking with you guys. Until next video, I'll see you then. Thanks.